Hi, Tim here. You're in the right place, and don't let my froggy voice dissuade you from listening to this little opening clip here from MLB Network from about 10 years ago. It's the dulcet tones of Bob Costas setting the tone for us with probably one of the most, if not the most, infamous and or famous and or successful and or disastrous promotions in baseball history. Listen to it. You'll know why. We get into that topic after you hear this.
MLB Network remembers July 1979. The intentions were so honorable to stamp out disco music. And here was the plan. 30 years ago, the White Sox and Tigers were due to play a twilight doubleheader at Comiskey Park. A local radio station, along with White Sox owner Bill Veeck and his son Mike, devised this promotion. Fans who brought their unwanted disco records, that's right, records, actual vinyl discs, would get in the game for 98 cents. The records would be collected, placed in a crate in center field, and blown up between games. Now, what could possibly go wrong with this harmless prank? On one level, the promotion certainly worked. Comiskey Park was completely sold out, with thousands reportedly outside still hoping for tickets. Then things began to unravel. Many of the fans waiting crashed the gates. During the first game, some fans started using the records as frisbees, throwing them onto the field, or at other times, throwing them at other fans.
I'm playing center field with the Detroit Tigers. We were scheduled for a doubleheader. They were zinging disco albums out there. There were some golf balls out there that says "Disco Sucks" on it. It was just a horrifying night.
But that was just the beginning. After the first game, the crate of disco records exploded as planned. What happened next was not planned. Thousands of fans immediately rushed the field. Some lit fires. The batting cage was destroyed. The field badly damaged. Multiple fights broke out. Veeck got on the PA and pleaded for the fans to return to their seats. They didn't. 39 people were arrested. The umpires declared the field unplayable and called off the second game.
One of the saddest sights I've ever seen in a ballpark in my life. This garbage of demolishing a record has turned into a fiasco.
The next day, it was ruled that the White Sox had failed to provide acceptable playing conditions, and therefore, they had to forfeit Game 2.
Last night was just a disaster that I didn't investigate, obviously, carefully enough. I tried to mix oil and water. The ones on the field were not baseball fans. And all that happened is that they managed to spoil it for the majority of people who are baseball fans.
And so, 30 years ago, July 12, 1979, Disco Demolition Night took its place as one of the great promotional fiascos of all time.
Tonight's ball game, the White Sox will feature Magic Night. Although it'll take a pretty good trick to make people forget what happened here last evening.
But looking back, what's the big deal? We all know that records were made to be broken.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
All right, you betcha. How are you, everybody? My name is Tim Hanlon. It's Good Seats is Still Available. It's the curious little podcast that is devoted to what used to be in professional sports. I thank you for finding us, and like I said earlier, I hope you don't mind my gravelly voice this week. Perhaps an FM DJ role could be in my future for overnights, and maybe a rock kind of format, AOR, a classic rock kind of format. But yeah, I got a cold. Okay, so whatever. We persevere around here because it is my duty, my honor, my privilege, my odd station in life to bring you the wild and woolly stories and things are related to that of the past of sports. Not the obvious stuff, but the most hard to describe and or obscure, I guess, is maybe kind of our want around here. So thanks for joining us. I hope you are well into your holiday celebrations and planning and that kind of stuff, and it's all going well. And what better way to celebrate the holidays than baseball? Yeah, it's months away, but why not? And this is a conversation we had a couple of weeks back that we're only now getting to deliver to you, largely because, well, not only because of other conversations we've had, but This book that our guest this week, Joe Natalicchio, has written is finally out, and we were a little dodgy. We couldn't sort of figure out when this book was actually going to get published by our friends at McFarland Publishing. But lo and behold, on the 3rd of December, sometime last week, the book called Baseball's Most Outrageous Promotions hit the stands, and it's a tour de force. Joe Natalicchio is here. He is the author of this book, and I'm going to let him describe his background and his interest in all this. But the subhead of this book is called From Wedlock and Headlock Day to Disco Demolition Night. This is a beautiful survey of almost a dozen different crazy promotions in baseball history in the major leagues, right? So the minor leagues are obviously very proficient and prolific, and synonymous, right, with promotions. And I'm not talking about like Bat Day and Hat Day and bobblehead days and all those kinds of stuff, right? A Hawaiian shirt here or there. We're talking about like those who literally and figuratively swung for the fences, and perhaps succeeded or didn't succeed, or maybe a combination of the two. And I think some people would argue that Disco Demolition from July of 1979 was equal parts of that. At some point, we'll do a deeper dive into that conversation. And Lord knows there have been wonderful documentary dives into that from a bunch of different perspectives, both from the Steve Dahl, crazy DJ kind of thing, to the what was going on in Chicago in the late 70s thing, to the angst of, middle-class white males and the onslaught of disco music, which seemed to be everywhere and in some cases threatening from a lifestyle perspective, given all the sort of the polyglot attractiveness of disco. And arguably the music itself was getting a little cliche by 1979. It had been a couple of years where it just literally was so pervasive that people were wondering if it was sort of, just mocking itself at some point, where the genre was kind of a passe and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to get into all that sort of dynamic, because that's at least a show and a half. And there are plenty of great documentaries out there. Perhaps we'll be lucky enough to get Steve Dahl if he wants to talk about it again. I doubt it, since he seems to be exhausted from everybody reminding him of this thing every year that, I think he kind of wants to increasingly distance himself from. But we'll get into that. But it's clear that that's probably one of, if not the top and most memorable, especially to the general populace, promotions and stuff. And that clip, again, came from Major League Baseball Network. It was Bob Costas, and it's probably the best 3-minute encapsulation of it. But, there's so many different things but it's a promotion that was designed to, like a lot of promotions, bring people into the stands, especially if the team wasn't doing all that well. And as we'll hear in our conversation coming up with Joe, baseball quite unique in all of pro sports, in that there's just a sheer volume of games, 162 plus playoffs sometimes, to entice people to come to the stadium. And a team could be out of the running by May, right? And that's where promotional ingenuity truly comes into play, not only to get people to the seats, but to frankly save the business and make money. These are not charities, these baseball franchises. And in our chat with Joe coming up, we're going to get into some of the Hall of Fame, I guess, of the best of those practitioners. Of course, Charlie Finley with the A's was very much in that pantheon. Bill Giles of the old Phillies organization. Bob Hope, no, not that one, with the Atlanta Braves and Ted Turner and all those kind of hijinks down there, as Atlanta was warming to the Braves and modernizing that team. And of course, the immortal, probably the George Washington of this category, is Bill Veeck, of course. Bill and his son Mike, responsible for that very disco demolition thing in 1979. But Veeck was also, a constant pot stirrer in outrageousness when it came to promotions. The Eddie Gadel story, which we'll talk about. Grandstand Managers Night, both the St. Louis Browns, when he owned that team. And of course, we cannot forget the infamous Cleveland Indians 10-cent beer night as discussed at length with our pal Scott Jarrett in our episode 358. But we'll cover that here as well. And just lots of fun stuff here. A little bit of a nostalgic look back at some of the well-intentioned yet perhaps maybe not most noble, shall we say, or successful, or maybe we're successful, depending on perspective, promotions in baseball history. A reminder, the book is now available. You can get it wherever good books are found. But of course, if you go to our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com, search up this episode numbered, what is it, 434? Yeah, I think so. 424. What is it? You know what? I gotta check. 424. I'm getting ahead of myself. Episode 424. It's right there in the episode description. How could I forget that? And on the website, you'll find that link to Amazon, where we'll get some shekels of referral love when you order the book that way. You get a paperback version. I believe it's also available in Kindle. I'm not quite sure. But head right out now and get it. It's called Baseball's Most Outrageous Promotions, from Wedlock and Headlock Day to Disco Demolition Night. And if that ain't intriguing, well, give a listen, because you'll be more intrigued after this conversation we had with Joe just a few weeks back. Please, as always, enjoy. Give me some sense of how you come to this topic. I'm assuming you're a baseball fan of some sort, but is there any sort of trade, if you will, that brings you into baseball? Are you a writer by trade? Or give us a little entree as to like how you even became interested in this particular topic.
Okay, well, let's start from the very beginning. I was born in Jersey City, but I grew up in Hoboken, which is, as you know, the birthplace of baseball. If I remember my Hoboken history correctly, I think it was June of 1846 on Elysian Fields in Hoboken. The New York Nine defeated the Knickerbockers 23-1 in a game played under the rules established by Alexander Cartwright, which I think are still the rules, basic rules of baseball today. Cartwright was, by the way, a bank clerk and a volunteer firefighter in Hoboken. I worked for the federal government for 30 years, and I worked as a high school guidance counselor for 10, which I enjoyed very much, by the way. Always wanted to write, but primarily fiction. And I've published 2 flash stories in the Avalon Literary Review and a short story, a murder mystery that appears on Mystery Tribune website. But when this opportunity came up to write nonfiction, I can't say I jumped at it. I thought about it long and hard. I realized it would be quite an investment of time and effort, but I figured I'd kick myself if I passed it up. And the way it started was kind of in a roundabout way. My son and myself, we're both big baseball fans. I became a baseball fan when I was 7 years old. I was watching television, and it was 1960. And my mother was changing the channels, probably to find something that I was interested in watching. And, you know, you had to actually stand up by the television to change the channels in 1960. There were no remotes. And she turned to a baseball game, and she stopped. She wasn't much of a baseball fan, but I think she knew something big was going to happen, because it was at that moment that Bill Mazeroski hit the home run that won the 1960 World Series for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And I was just amazed. I was amazed at what happened. I was amazed at the crowd reaction. And ever since then, I've been something of a baseball fan. My son's a baseball fan too, and he suggested that I write a book about the 5 forfeits in Major League Baseball since 1956. There's only been 5 forfeits in Major League Baseball. At the beginning of baseball, there were a lot of forfeits. I think it was more of a rough and tumble game. but there have been very few, and all of the forfeits have happened since 1970. And the five, if we're interested, the Washington Senators' last game in 1971, Cleveland Indians' 10-cent beer night, which happened in 74, a kind of a strange game in which Earl Weaver refused to permit his Baltimore Oriole team to take the field because of the danger posed by tarps placed on two pitching mounds that sat in foul territory, which I think essentially were the bullpen in Exhibition Stadium. Disco Demolition Night in 79 and Souvenir Baseball Night, that was the Dodgers promotion, in 95. I wrote the book. I sent it to McFarland Publishing in North Carolina. And the editor there said that he liked the book, but he was reluctant to publish it because McFarland had just published another book on Major League Baseball forfeits. And I'm sure McFarland would be very pleased if I plugged their book, this book, Forfeits and Successfully Protested Games in Major League Baseball, a Complete Record, 1871 to 2013, by David Nemec and Eric Micklick. The editor suggested that I write a different book, a book on baseball's most outrageous promotions. He pointed out correctly that I would be able to use 4 of the chapters in the forfeits book, since 4 of the forfeits resulted from promotions. So once again, I thought about it long and hard. I talked to friends and family and decided that I'd go forward with it. And that's how the book came about. It took about 3 years to write and publish.
Interesting. So what did you think you were going to find by going back into this, right? The forfeits, those 4 of those, right, makes a ton of sense, right? Because you'd think that that would, the outlandishness, the more outlandish, the more likely to get in the way of the game and stuff. What did you think was out there, and how far back did you cast your net to kind of go with that sort of new direction?
Okay, I cast my net fairly far back. Up until 1946, Bill Veeck, when he bought the Cleveland Indians, baseball was, I think I write in the book, a promotional wasteland. The owners of baseball teams didn't believe in doing anything to enhance the entertainment brought about by simply the baseball game.
Because what? It would be desultory towards the game. It would be disrespectful. It's not what people come out to see. Exactly. No, lack of creativity. The game itself is too good. What?
Baseball. They thought baseball was something sacred, almost like a religion, and it would be sacrilegious to promote the game by having any kinds of promotions. The baseball was for men who revered the game. And any effort to promote the game otherwise was totally inappropriate. Other than an occasional ladies' day, where a man can bring his wife or companion to the ballpark, that was about it. That was about it until 1946. And Bill Veeck bought the Cleveland Indians and started promoting the Indians in a way that had never been done before in baseball.
So it's fair to say, right, that would you consider then Bill Veeck the sort of patron saint of baseball promotions, both classic, innovative, as well as perhaps outrageous?
Absolutely.
Okay, give us a little bit. I mean, obviously we've done some exploration of the mighty Bill Veeck and his various phases and stuff. But what, for those who are maybe new to the Veeck legacy, what was it about this guy that kind of drove him to do these things and baseball? Because he certainly loved baseball, but he brought a very creative angle to all of it.
Yes, he wanted to expand the game so that it was not only for men in white starched shirts who revered it, but also for families. He wanted to see women and children at the game. I think he did this because he loved baseball and wanted others to women and children to enjoy baseball too. But let's face it, he was a businessman. Women and children paid. So he was looking to bring more fans to the ballpark. He owned the Cleveland Indians. That was the first team he owned. He owned the St. Louis Browns and the Chicago White Sox twice. Now there are other. In the book, I argue that 1946 to early 1980 is the era of the Barnums. This is something that I don't think had ever been suggested before. And I suggest that there were 9 promotions staged by 4 showmen or Barnums during that period that were, in my opinion anyway, outrageous. The other Barnums are Charlie O'Finley, who owned the Kansas City and later Oakland Athletics, Bill Giles, an executive for the Philadelphia Phillies, who worked under Ruly Carpenter, and Bob Hope, an executive with the Atlanta Braves, who worked under Ted Turner. Together, they staged 9 promotions that are in the book as absolutely outrageous. The 9 promotions are Bill Vex has 3, but we'll do them in chronological order. The first one is the Eddie Gadel game. And after that, Grandstand Managers Night, in which he actually had people in the stands manage the team.
So these are both from the Cleveland days, correct?
No, these are both from the St. Louis Browns.
St. Louis Browns. I'm sorry, my mistake. Of course. I'm kidding. I'm jumping ahead. I'm already thinking about beer night at Cleveland Indians. It has nothing to do with it. So okay. So explain the each of those sort of in either together or just kind of in perspective, right? So the era and the stadium and the Browns competitiveness, shall we say, both on the field as well as at the box office, or perhaps lack thereof. Set the Browns story in motion a bit so we kind of understand like what Veck was working with and perhaps why he was doing these things.
Sure. The Browns were awful. They were an awful team. They had been an awful team for a very long time. He knew when he got into it in 51, he knew he was buying a team that played very poorly and attracted very few fans. And he was a man of tremendous confidence, and he believed that he could turn that team around. And he knew that in addition to, improving the product on the field, he needed to use promotions heavily.
But he was also, obviously a showman type, right? In terms of his bombast and his, but he wasn't always, frankly, welcome with open arms by attempting or even envisioning some of these things, right? This, in some respects, right? I'm gotta think that he was kind of the, I don't know, icebreaker for that sort of staid gentleman's revered game that you were mentioning before. He was the avatar for that.
Absolutely, yes. And let's talk a little bit about Eddie Gadel and how it was received by those in power in baseball. Veck wanted to stage a promotion to mark the American League's 50th anniversary. Okay. And he also got an idea that he would tie in this promotion with a promotion for Falstaff Beer, which was the team's radio sponsor at the time. Now, Vec promises the Falstaff managers that he's going to do a promotion that'll make them a household name all over the country. Well, they press. They want to know, what are you going to do? And he says, look, this is so big. This is so exciting. This is so explosive that I can't possibly tell you what it is, because it might leak out, and then the powers that be are not going to permit it to happen. Fact of the matter was, according to his own autobiography, he had no idea what he was going to do. In his discussions with fans, this is totally separate, and he was always talking to fans. I mean, he didn't sit in the owner's suite and watch the game from there with his friends. He sat in the stands with the fans, talking to them about the game. And in his discussions with fans, the fans complained. They complained a lot. It was a bad team. But they complained that the team doesn't have a real leadoff hitter, someone who can regularly get on base. So Vec sought to solve that problem. Then he had a brainstorm. He would accomplish both. He would have a major promotion for Falstaff Beer, and he would find a leadoff batter who could regularly get on base. And he was going to accomplish this by having a little person, 3'7" Eddie Gadel, take an official major league at-bat as a leadoff hitter. Now, Gadel was reluctant to participate, but Vec gave him the hard sell. Your name will go in the record books for all time. You'll be famous. You'll be immortal. I thought that last one was a bit much, but it wasn't the kind of immortality that Babe Ruth enjoys. But nevertheless, Eddie Gadel is still remembered to this day. So at least until now, he's been immortal. Now, he shows Eddie Gadel the batting stance he wants him to get into. Gadel gets into the batting stance and swings the bat, and Vec cautions him in no uncertain terms, you are not to swing the bat. It is to stay on your shoulder for 4 pitches, figuring that the pitcher would never be able to throw a strike. Eddie Gadel had about 1.5 inch strike zone. Vec gave Gadel a contract, but made sure the American League offices would not receive a copy of the contract till after the game. So they had no idea. Will Harridge, who was president of the American League, had no idea that this was going to happen. And he gave a contract to Zach Taylor, who was the manager, because he figured that the umpires would object to Eddie Gadel batting. And he wanted Zach Taylor to be able to run out there and show them that he had a bona fide contract. Vec also arranged for photography for the game. And there's that ubiquitous photo of Eddie Gadel, I think that many baseball fans have seen, standing there at home plate. Now, he wanted to introduce Eddie Gadel to the fans. It was a doubleheader. The game was the event was a doubleheader. He wanted to introduce Eddie Gadel to the fans before Gadel actually stepped up to the plate. So then he arranged that in addition to the promotion for the American League and for Falstaff Beer, he would have a birthday for his manager, Zach Taylor. Now, it wasn't Zach Taylor's birthday, but, details. We don't have to worry about those. So in between games, Gadel was supposed to jump out of a pretend birthday cake. Bill Durney who worked for Vec, was responsible for putting Gadel in the cake. Gadel didn't want to go in. He was upset. He didn't want to do it. He was changing his mind. And Gurney, who was 6'4" and weighed like 250 pounds, said, look, Eddie, there are 18,000 people in this stadium. There's one I know I can lick. You're going into that cake one way or the other. And he lifts Gadel and he puts him in the cake. The cake is rolled out between the two games of the doubleheader. There's an announcement that for his birthday, Zach Taylor is getting a new brownie. Of course, the team being the St. Louis Browns. And Eddie Gadel jumps out of the cake. The false, to say the least, the fall staff people are terribly disappointed. They thought they were going to get something special. And they get a little person jumping out of a cake. I mean, it really wasn't all that much. Beck never said a word. He never told them what would happen next. At the beginning of the second game, the stadium announcer intones these immortal words. For the Browns, number 1/8, Eddie Gadel batting for Saucier. Up to the plate walked 3'7" Eddie Gadel in a child's Browns uniform brandishing a toy bat. The fans gave him a standing ovation. The umpires, their reaction was just the opposite. They objected and refused to permit him to take his at-bat, but manager Zach Taylor shows them that official contract, and umpires decide to let Gadel bat. Detroit Tigers pitcher Bob Kane stared down a virtually non-existent strike zone, throws 4 balls. Gadel walks down to first base, and he was replaced by pinch runner Jim Delsing. A picture of Gadel at bat appeared in newspapers across the country, of course, containing an article associated with an article that pointed out that this was, at least in part, a promotion for Falstaff beer. So Falstaff did get national notoriety. The American League president, Will Harridge, was livid, flabbergasted. He couldn't believe that Beck had, in his mind, demeaned the game by staging such a stunt. He banned little persons from playing baseball, and he even went so far as to say that he would remove Gadel's at-bat from the record books. Now, it was pointed out to him that baseball records all have to work together. They're kind of weaved together, and you can't just take an at-bat out of the record books without affecting lots of other records, like the number of pitchers that Bob Kane threw. So he relented, and Gadel is still in that at-bat, is still in the record.
I was just checking baseballreference.com, and indeed there it is. I didn't really know that, but that's but there was talk though about striking it. I mean, there was real serious consideration, right? I mean, the president really wanted to kind of erase that kind of thing, but it was all above board in terms of by the rules, right? Essentially.
Absolutely. Yes. It was all.
So what happens in the aftermath? I mean, does Beck get fined? What happens to the contract? It was only for a day anyway, so that it kind of expired. What's the end game of all of it?
The end game of all this, Beck doesn't ever give up. I mean, he loved needling the people who ran Major League Baseball. He complained that if Eddie Gadel was too short to play baseball, that Phil Rizzuto was really just a tall little person. And he shouldn't be permitted to play baseball either. He also suggested that I think it's Walt Dropo, who played for the Boston Red Sox, who was 6'6", was too tall to play baseball. And he shouldn't be permitted to play. And when someone suggested that having a little person bat first gave the team an unfair advantage, as if this was going to happen again, which it obviously never did, he suggested that Ted Williams gave the Red Sox an unfair advantage, and he shouldn't be playing baseball either.
Good logic. There you go.
Good logic, good thinking, right? Yes.
So yeah, of course, and clearly all of that is legendary and stuff. But it probably endeared Vec to being kind of a folk hero, right, amongst certain folk in and outside of baseball.
Yes, absolutely. But there was a downside to this. Now, Vec was never able to turn around the St. Louis Browns. When he sold them, they were just as awful as when he bought them. And he wanted, the attendance was absolutely terrible, and he was losing money hand over fist. And they had just built a new stadium in Baltimore, Maryland, and he wanted to move the team to Baltimore. The other owners had to approve the move, and they did not. And they had a number of reasons why they didn't want to approve the move. One of them was the Eddie Gadel game. They felt what he had done was inappropriate, and they wanted to show their disdain, I guess, by disallowing the move. Bill Vec eventually had no choice but to sell the team, interestingly enough, to someone who moved it to Baltimore.
Let's go do a quick segue to the other kind of major promotional thing that you talk about with him during his Browns tenure, and which also graces the cover of the book, which is and there's a reason why, because that photo is it's just superb.
Thank you.
How would you describe, what's the official title for this other promotion that we're going to talk about?
Okay, Grandstand Managers Night.
Right, Grandstand Managers Night. What's the premise, and why is he doing this?
Okay. Vec was talking, Vec would meet with anyone who would talk to him about his team. He didn't care if it was, 10 women or 100 rabid baseball fans. He will talk to anyone. He was talking to a group of coal miners, of all things. And he was giving them this standard presentation about how he planned to improve the team's play on the field. And then he mentioned, out of nowhere, that he planned to stage a promotion in which the fans in the stands could manage the game. He said that he wanted to heighten fans' experience of the game by having them actually manage the team. You go to a baseball game and, you watch the play on the field and you leave basically with a memory of what happened. Vec sought to intensify that memory. He felt that if the fans were actually in charge to some degree, of what was happening on the field, that they would get an enhanced experience of the game. It would be more than just a memory. It would be not only something they watched, but something they did, which I think stays with you longer than just a memory. So it gets out, by the way, that he's going to do this. And the other team owners are once again livid, very unhappy, demeans the game. Apparently, things like this had been done in the minor leagues and with barnstorming teams, but never in the major leagues. But undeterred, Vec goes forward with his plan. He places an advertisement in the St. Louis Globe Democrat, soliciting fans who sought to participate in managing the game. He gets 4,000 responses, one as far away as Anchorage, Alaska. And as it turns out, a little over 1,100 of these fans actually attend the game. And they're all herded into a certain section of the ballpark. I believe was right behind the Browns dugout. And two of these grandstand managers were selected to be coaches who would drive the process. Now, when they enter the ballpark, the grandstand managers are given signs that have yes in big letters written in green on one side and no in big letters written on the other. When the game situation warranted, the two coaches, who were not real coaches, they were just selected from the people who wanted to participate, they would they'd send a message to a Browns team official who would hold up a sign in front of the grandstand managers. For example, if the coaches were considering removing a pitcher, they would relay this information to the grandstand managers by holding up a sign saying, like, shall we jerk the bum? And then the grandstand managers would hold up their signs, yes and no, and the majority would rule the day.
Crazy, fun.
Yeah. Yes.
And so where's the manager of this team is a guy by the name of, what's his name? I had it on the tip of my tongue. I actually knew this. What's that? Zach Taylor. Yeah. Okay. So, how does he take to this? Does he enjoy this thing, or is he kind of bristling at the meddling that Vec is kind of doing in this, or is he going along for the ride?
From my understanding, he goes along for the ride. He's in the stadium. He sits in a rocking chair near the dugout, smoking a pipe while all this is going on.
So it's kind of like a night off for him, essentially.
Night off for him, yeah. And, if you want to work for Bill Vec, these things are going to happen.
Just part of the deal of working for Mr. Vec. Interesting.
Working for Mr. Vec, right. So at the beginning of the game, the pitcher gives up 3 runs in the first inning. The Browns pitcher gives up. So they pull up a sign, shall we pull the pitcher? And they say the grandstand managers hold up their signs, and the answer is no. Vec felt that they didn't want to hurt his feelings. But at any rate, he stays in the game, and it was the right decision because he completes a complete game, and he doesn't give up any more runs. Then there are there's a guy on first for the opposing team. So they hold up a sign saying, should they play? I guess it was first and third. So they hold up a sign saying, should we play the infield at double play depth? And the answer was yes. And that was the right answer because the batter hit into a double play. Then with the Browns player at first, they held up a sign saying, should he steal? Well, the grandstand manager said yes, but given the public nature of how they made their decision, the opposing team knew he was going to steal. So he was out by quite a bit. But after that, the game proceeded without the need for the grandstand managers. Interestingly enough, while the other owners were not pleased with this promotion, and it was one of the reasons, in addition to the Eddie Gadel game, why they didn't permit Vec to stay an owner and move his team to Baltimore. The Sporting News, which was the Bible of baseball at the time, they gave it a surprisingly positive review, which amazed me, actually. I thought that they'd be more, keeping to the traditions of the game.
But he also, I mean, look, in retrospect, right? Clearly, and this is we got 7 others to get to, which I don't going to give them much time, but or at least talk to the end story of Bill Vec, right? Is that he was obviously maybe not as much in the moment, but certainly was revered as a genius after his passing and his contributions to the game. And arguably, right, I think most people would say that there's kind of like before Vec and after Vec, and that the delineation, that line, that Mendoza line, is entertaining, right? The game is the game, but he made it entertaining. And these are just two flashes of brilliance. And the irony about this too, I didn't know this till I scanned through your book. These two events we just described were literally 5 days apart from each other in 1951.
Yeah, they were very close, very close.
That must have been a hell of a week in the Browns Stadium.
Yeah, it must have been, yes. And I just thought of something. Interestingly enough, Bill Veeck is in the Hall of Fame, and his plaque mentions many of his accomplishments as a team owner. But the last sentence, I believe, is something to the effect of that he was a fan of the little person.
Literally and figuratively in this case.
Literally and figuratively in this case.
Yeah, I mean, look, the fans, right? He's about the fans, and look, it's also not because because it's in the cockles of his heart, right? It's good business, right? You've got, and this I think speaks to the baseball's got a lot of seats to fill during the course of the season, right? More so than any other sport in the United States, right? So you gotta get creative, because the game itself can't sell itself all the time, because some of those games can be boring, some of them can be interesting, and you never know what you're going to get in 81 games now. But I don't know what the number was back then, but it's a lot of games, a lot of seats to fill, and I think Veeck kind of was a genius in that regard to sort of see that ahead of time.
Yes, and it was interesting. He wanted the fan to leave the stadium saying, whether or not the home team won, we had a good time. That's what he was after. He wanted fans to have a good time, whether or not the team on the field won the game. The team they supported won the game, and he did. He did. I think they did have a good time. I think it was he made baseball game is special, just the baseball game. But he made it more special. He made it more memorable. He made it more interesting for the fans who were lucky enough to be able to go to the games that he was responsible for.
All right, we'll come back to Veeck and maybe as a tail end of this with his son Mike for obvious reasons. But let's give me a little bit of insight into Charles Finley. We've talked about the A's in various forms of its life, including, by the way, their sort of crazy current status in Sacramento, and maybe still, quote unquote, going to Las Vegas and stuff. But the years that Charlie Finley owned both the Kansas City and Oakland versions of the A's, maybe a little background and the example that you sort of cite in the book of his promotional wizardry / craziness. I would argue he's maybe like a runner-up to Veeck in terms of this category.
Yes, I would say he's a runner-up, although Bill Giles and Bob Hope, the two other Barnums, were impressive in their own ways. I would say that Charlie Finley came up with some far-fetched promotions, and I think you're right. He was second, in a sense, to Bill Veeck. Finley had a difficult time in Kansas City. He didn't feel it. He came to the decision fairly quickly that Kansas City really couldn't support a baseball team. And you got to remember, he didn't have a very good baseball team in Kansas City. It was an old park that they were playing in, and he really did have difficulty attracting fans to the stadium. So he went on a campaign of looking for someplace other than Kansas City to move his team. That he did this, he tried to do this secretly, but of course there were no secrets. It came out. And fans were displeased that he was trying to move the Athletics out of Kansas City. When it came time to renew the contract he had with the stadium, it was very contentious. But he was pretty much locked into signing a contract because the other team owners would not permit him to move. So by the time, I think this is like 68, and no, it was 64, that he signs a new lease to keep the team in Kansas City. He is not a very popular person. And that is reflected on his team. And the attendance was very, very poor. So he felt he needed to do something big to get into the good graces of the Kansas City fans once again and increase the flow of fans into the ballpark. So what could be, this is 64 now, what could be more spectacular than to bring the greatest show on earth to Kansas City? And I'm talking about the Beatles. Those of us who were not around back in the 60s, I was, those of us who were not around don't realize just how big they were. They weren't popular. They were spectacular. They were it. They were as if the only entertainment venue was the Beatles. So he pays them an unheard of sum of $150,000 to appear at Municipal Stadium in Kansas City in September of 64. The motto was for the concert was, today's Beatle fans are tomorrow's baseball fans. So although this particular promotion wasn't connected to a baseball game, I still felt it was appropriate to keep it in the book since it was clearly associated with baseball. Now, Finley was very optimistic, and he had reason to be about this concert. The Beatles sold out wherever they played in America. And he even offered to give Children's Mercy Hospital in the Kansas City area a donation from the proceeds. He knew he was going to make money. Now, according to one source, when Finley learned that the Beatles planned to play only a half hour for $150,000, he negotiated with, of all people, John Lennon to extend the concert, even offering them more money, but John refused. In the end, unfortunately, the Beatles played before a nearly half-empty arena. Only about 20,000 concert goers showed up in an arena that would have filled 34,000 if it would have accommodated 34,000 if it was full. The newspapers in Kansas City and other media sources urged the people of Kansas City to boycott the concert. They were that displeased with Charlie Finley as a way of showing their displeasure with Finley. And it worked. And I find that absolutely amazing. Given how popular the Beatles were, I can't imagine that young people in Kansas City could care less whether the newspapers wanted them to boycott the concert, and they would go. But the animosity toward Finley was so great that the stadium was almost half empty. Finley lost money on the concert, but he felt obligated to donate $25,000 out of his own pocket to Children's Mercy Hospital. And I say in the book that the Beatles played as one of their songs that evening, "Can't Buy Me Love," and the words are "Money can't buy me love," which possibly was a message to Charlie Finley that the concert he paid for wasn't going to buy the affection of the people of Kansas City.
That's crazy. I mean, only could Charlie Finley not sell out the Beatles in 1964. I mean, that is just insane. But I also, my understanding is too that the Beatles also had a special song in there. They actually played their version of Kansas City, which I think is a mashup of another Hey 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 song
Yes, right.
to the mix and stuff to kind of make it a little more fun and stuff. I got to imagine the fans of that concert must have felt, I don't know, like there was kind of a special, unique situation versus, a Shea Stadium, just craziness, can't hear a thing kind of thing because it's only half full.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was. It must have been sort of unreal situation to walk into a half full Beatle concert, and looking at it from the other way, the Beatles weren't used to seeing 20,000 empty seats.
Tell me about Bill Giles and his Phillies situation, because I think he's a guy that's a little less kind of revered on that Mount Rushmore promotional craziness.
A bit, but he was quite brilliant in his own right. What's interesting about I categorize the three. I categorize it's actually 13 altogether, outrageous promotions in three categories. One is those that were designed to be outrageous, and we talked about those. Eddie Gadel Day and Grandstand Managers Night. Bill Veeck planned those to be outrageous. Then there were those that were ill-considered, and we haven't talked about any of them, but certainly Disco Demolition Night and 10-cent beer night were ill-considered. I mean, what were they thinking to sell beer at 10 cents a pop, to fans? I mean, that didn't work out well at all. And then there were those.
We had a why don't we stay on that for a second? Why don't we double click on both of those? We had a conversation last year with Scott Jarrett, who wrote the Cleveland Indians 10-cent beer night book.
Okay.
And it's interesting. I think these two events, right, are probably neck and neck in terms of the all-time most outrageous and/or notorious disasters, if you will, right?
Yes, I would agree.
And it's interesting because the lists you look at, it's weird that I think of people of a certain generation, especially the latter part of the 1970s, right? Disco Demolition is just, it had so much attached to it, including music and culture and class differences and race implications and all that kind of stuff. Whereas 1974, 5 years earlier, it seems like almost completely different, but it was more, like what happens when alcohol fuels everything and people get out of control.
Yes.
In your mind, so a little bit about both of those would help, I think, the conversation, but also where do you stand on flipping the coin between these two? I'll put you on the spot.
Okay. My research tells me that Disco Demolition Night was the most notorious of the 13 outrageous promotions. It not only ended in a riot and a forfeit, but there was some sense that in holding the promotion, Major League Baseball insulted, I can't think of a better word, the people who support disco. So it sent very bad vibes throughout the community of people who supported disco. And interestingly enough, although you can't find a causal relationship, disco collapsed after Disco Demolition Night. And there are those.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, people kind of say, these things don't sort of happen, overnight, so to speak. But I mean, there is literally a very bright line, it seems. I don't know if it caused it, right? But it certainly maybe exacerbated what was already starting to weaken, and it truly became emblematic of the end or the beginning of the end, and quickly of
Yes,
the phenomenon.
absolutely. Yes, it was sort of a harbinger of the end of disco in America. And like I said, you can't find, as we just said, you can't find a causal relationship, and yet you can't deny that almost immediately after Disco Demolition Night, disco started fading from the American culture.
Trust me, I'm a pop chart junkie, and I know all about this stuff. So I could literally try. I mean, with the exception of like Funky Town by Lip Sync in 1980, right? I mean, basically, and a few songs left by Donna Summer and Chic and Barbara Streisand, I think, had one as well. Yes,
Okay.
it pretty much just disappeared. But this was, and we can devote a whole show to this, and we will at some point someday soon. But um, Mike Veeck, obviously son of Bill, part of the organization of the White Sox. This promotion, right, was more. I would argue was more a marriage of promotional convenience with that of Steve Dahl, a very popular rock jock at the time on a
Yes.
local station called WLUP, The Loop,
Yes.
in Chicago. And it was kind of Dahl's kind of dynamic of, you know, we're a rock station. You know, I don't think Dahl had any real sort of animus towards disco per se. It was a promotionally convenient thing for him to harp on the fact that he's at a rock station now. He was relatively new to it, right? And you know, we hate disco. We love rock. Let's play more rock and roll. And that became its own thing. And I got to think Veeck, Mike, would look at that as more, hey, there's an audience here. We love rock music. Radio does always a good job with promoting and stuff. Let's combine audiences here and make something out of, a double header that probably is only going to, attract maybe 12,000 people anyway on its own.
Right. Absolutely.
Seems almost more innocent than it really kind of wound up being. I know I'm projecting there, but
yeah, it was. It was ill. I consider it ill-advised. I really do. Because you got to remember, they blew up tens of thousands of records in a bin in center, right behind second base. They created a crater in the field, and shards of records landed all over the field. It was almost impossible to clean up. From that perspective, I think they should have realized that this might not have been the best idea, and they probably shouldn't have gone forward with it.
I also think it began way earlier than that, right? I don't think anybody, Veeck or Dahl, or certainly anybody related to either of them and their organizations, would have imagined that the place not only would draw a big crowd, but sell out crowd, and then maybe another 10 or 15 or even 20,000 by certain estimates,
right,
that never made it into the park at all in the first place, right? I mean, that's just, I don't think anybody could have seen that, and that tapped a nerve for whatever reasons. That was probably beyond that promotional convenience thing that the two guys are probably thinking about in the beginning.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Yes, I don't think
innocence.
anyone envisioned that there'd be 55, 60,000 people in a stadium that accommodates 45,000 people. And
right,
which is arithmetic, and you got 15,000 people without seats.
Yeah, and the security needed for that kind of stuff. We'll double click in that at some point, because that is just a rich tableau, and there've been movies devoted to specifically that. But tell me on the 10-cent beer night thing, because I think that's a little bit lesser known, but certainly within baseball circles still is notorious in some respects. But it feels to me like that was a little bit more straightforward, right? It's just beer, cheap, and what could go wrong. Was there anything more to it than that?
Oh, yes, definitely. Something happened prior to that particular game that no one anticipated, that I think caused the crowd to generate a certain animus toward the Texas Rangers, the opponents, that evening. 6 days before the Cleveland Indians played the Texas Rangers on 10-cent beer night. They played a game at in Arlington, and there was a major dugout clearing fight between the teams. Indian player Lenny Randall slid hard into second base to break up a double play, and the Texas players took offense. So when Randall gets up to bat, pitcher Milt Wilcox, he throws a ball behind Randall's head, which, as you know, is very dangerous. Randall takes offense at the pitch at his head. He bunts down the first baseline. Wilcox picks up the ball to make a play. Randall runs out of the baseline and body slams Wilcox into the ground. Then he starts a fight with Texas first baseman John Ellis. The dugouts, both teams exit their dugouts, and there's a fight. And this was no, usual baseball fight where the players basically give each other dirty looks. They were really swinging at each other. They were landing punches. And then the fans got into the act because, believe it or not, it was cheap beer night in Arlington Stadium. And they started throwing beer onto the Cleveland Indians team. So there's a great deal of animosity now between the teams. And of course, Billy Martin, who managed the Texas Rangers, he's asked if he's concerned about playing in Cleveland in just 6 days. And he responds brilliantly, nah, they don't have enough fans to worry about. Well, after the fight, the Cleveland Sports Radio focuses on Texas's visit to Cleveland as an opportunity for payback. So it was almost set up that there was going to be a problem at that game. And it was exacerbated by the fact that it was 10-cent beer night. And the rules for beer purchase were a recipe for disaster. Fans could purchase as many as 6 12-ounce cups of beer at a time for 10 cents. Underage fans were not carded. Fans showed up to the stadium drunk or stoned on marijuana. They brought in their own alcohol, sometimes hard alcohol, and marijuana, not to mention firecrackers and other incendiary devices. So the fans, the sports talk shows had revved up the fans that they were going not just to see a baseball game, but they were going to give payback to the Texas Rangers for what they did 6 days earlier. Well, the game is constantly delayed by fans jumping onto the field. Billy Martin is booed energetically when he brings out the lineup card. In the second inning, Rangers designated hitter Tom Greaves hits a home run. That seems for some reason to wake the crowd up, and a middle-aged woman enters the field, exposes herself, and tries to kiss home plate umpire Nestor Shylock. Soon thereafter, a young male fan, stripped naked, streaked across the playing field. Security guards were unable to catch him. In the third inning, continuing with this theme of nakedness, a streaker runs onto the field along the outfield wall. Tom Greaves hits a second home run in the fourth inning. While he's running the bases, a naked fan runs onto the field and slides into second base. They're quickly losing control of the game. In the top of the sixth inning, Billy Martin enters the field to complain about a close play. Fans boo him and pelt him with cups, both empty and full of beer. Martin responds by blowing kisses to the crowd. That was like waving a red flag before a bull. After that, it was as if all restraint on the part of the fans totally disappeared. Fans, they threw objects, beer, rocks, batteries, hot dogs at players. They threw garbage, tennis balls, batteries, rocks, firecrackers at the Rangers bullpen. Fans enter the field with impunity. They run on the roof of the Rangers dugout where they jump up and down. They sat on the outfield wall where they created more mayhem. At this point, it's important to realize that the concession stands ran out of beer. Well, did Indians management take this opportunity to stop selling beer to the obviously inebriated crowd? No, they instructed those wanting more beer to obtain it directly from a Stroh's truck vehicle behind the outfield wall. Fans became agitated as the long lines formed. They overturned the tables put there to separate customers from the people serving them, and they ran directly up to the truck. And they filled mugs, pitchers, thermoses. Some fans actually drank out of the beer spigots.
Perfect.
Okay. Now, in the ninth inning, the score is tied 5-5. A fan runs out on the field to steal a hat from Texas outfielder Jeff Burrow. Okay, he wanted a souvenir he wanted a game use souvenir without paying for it. In a scuffle, Burrows falls to the ground. He tries to intercept the kid, but is unable to, and he falls. Billy Martin, from his vantage point in the dugout, really can't see what happens, but he sees Burrows falling to the ground. And he believes he's being attacked by the fans. And he rallies his players, some carrying bats, to run out into the outfield to save Jeff Burrows. Well, when the players arrive out there, they're surrounded by, no one really knows the number, but it must be scores of drunken, armed fans itching for a fight. The Rangers initially retreated, but after being provoked, they approached the fans with more determination. Ken Aspromonte, who's the Indians manager, sees what's happening and rallies his players like the cavalry to reinforce the Rangers players fighting the fans in the field. Now, these were real fights. I mean, the baseball players had the upper hand, and they were giving a beating to some of the fans. A riot happens, and the players get the upper hand on the drunken fans. The players finally retreat to the respective clubhouses, and fans not fighting anymore, they decide just to steal fixtures from the playing field. The game is forfeited to the Rangers. Now, there's disagreement. There was disagreement over who caused the forfeit. Some blamed Indian management, or that's who I would blame. I mean, they should have known better. I think this was an ill-advised promotion. Some blame Billy Martin because, I mean, he effectively ended the game when he marched his players out onto the field to confront the fans who were, he thought, attacking Jeff Burrows. Ken Aspromonte, he blamed society as a whole. He thought there was something wrong, something going terribly wrong with American society. But in the book, I say that the American League president made what might be the greatest understatement in baseball when he said, there is no question that beer played a part in this riot.
Also known as Captain Obvious.
Yes, right. Absolutely.
Craziness. I encourage our audience to go to last year's episode 358, where we go really in depth with Scott Jarrett on this. And I got to think at some point when you're doing all this research and you're putting all these words together to kind of describe all that stuff, just it's hard to think, but both of these major faux pas, shall we say, that people weren't a little bit more thoughtful about all this kind of stuff. But then again, we weren't there, right? We weren't there in the midst of the promotional needs of the teams and how they're doing and how to generate interest and what people are capable of or not capable of in sort of moments of uncertainty, creativity, and in some cases even duress. All right, we gotta wrap up. But before we run. And we want people to get the book, and we're going to promote the heck out of it, of course, because there are plenty of other things on your list here and other situations and people and that kind of stuff. But I just want a Cliff Notes version of the wet T-shirt night thing. Now, I think people kind of know what that's all about and that dynamic. And you could go to a bar or a restaurant on a certain weekend and today and see some of those things. But Atlanta Braves baseball game. Give us a little bit of background on that, because I want to, I think people kind of maybe put that as maybe third on the list of all timers.
Yes, yeah, I would think so. Turner and Hope, Ted Turner and Bob Hope, they never planned wet T-shirt night. It just happened. The team was playing very poorly, and attendance had hit rock bottom. Okay, they were looking for something. Bob Hope said, these aren't his exact words, but the team may be dead, but we still have to keep the franchise alive. And
this is, by the way, this is in 1977. This is one of the earliest years of Ted Turner's ownership of the Braves. And people know Ted Turner as being literally a creative, crazy man / genius in the media space, as he now is kind of building his sports empire in Atlanta too.
Yes, definitely. So anyway, they had a series of college nights, and they held a meeting with some college kids to see what they might do on college nights. And someone suggested, must have been a guy, a wet T-shirt contest. Well, Hope rejects the idea as being in poor taste. But he mentions it to some of his colleagues, who mention it to a newspaper reporter, who contacts Hope and says, well, this may be in poor taste, but why don't we find out what the fans think? I'll write an article and we'll get some feedback. Well, you can see a slippery slope here. He writes the article. The fans are very much favorable to a wet T-shirt night. The Braves are of two minds on this. On the one hand, it's one way to increase attendance. They don't know what else to do. But on the other hand, it objectifies women, and that's maybe inappropriate. So Ted Turner has a good idea. They go to the Atlanta Christian Council, which represents all the Christian denominations in Atlanta, and asks them, figuring one way or another, we'll have cover. If they say it's not a good idea, then they'll simply tell the fans that the Christian Council said it was inappropriate in Atlanta society. But if they approved it, then, it doesn't break any of the 10 commandments. We can go forward with it. They made their speech, made their presentation to the Atlanta Christian Council, and the council said that they could go ahead with it with two stipulations. One, that it be held after the game, so people who didn't want to watch this contest could leave. And incredibly, someone from the Atlanta Christian Council wanted to participate as one of the judges. There was a long rain delay that night. They didn't pre-register the women, so they weren't sure that anyone was going to participate in the contest. But then they invited women to sign up for the contest in the 6th inning, and they had a good number. I think it was 40-something women who agreed to, 43 women participated. And they were, it was a wet t-shirt contest. After the game, they were hosed down with water. There's no record of the judging criteria, but you can use your imagination. Turns out a minister's daughter won the contest. Hope was concerned about this. He felt that all along that he and Ted Turner would get in trouble for holding this type of a promotion. And when the Phillies owner, who was very close to the commissioner, Bowie Kuhn, they took photos, of course. And Ruley Carpenter wanted to see the photos. Bob Hope was very concerned that he was going to show them to Bowie Kuhn, who was going to call him and Ted Turner on the carpet. But it turns out that Ruley Carpenter just wanted to show the pictures to his friends.
And the rest is history. It's just crazy. All right, so this is nuts, and there's a lot more detail to this stuff too. And I'm not sure you had pictures, but there are pictures online. So if you feel like you need to find out of the accuracy of that. But let's wind up with this question. I'm sure you had other things. I got 2 other questions before as we go out. Number one, were there other promotions that were kind of also on your short list that didn't make the cut? And or is there fodder for more volume 2, so to speak?
I don't know that there's fodder for a volume 2, but there were other promotions that came close. Charlie Finley did an automobile industry night in which he gave out basically jalopies, junk cars. He painted them up and put some accessories on them and raffled them off to fans who thought they were getting cars until they tried to drive them out of the parking lot and they wouldn't they wouldn't go.
So the deception was intentional?
I think so, yes.
Charlie Finley. That's fantastic.
And
it's not fantastic, but it's fantastic.
Yes, and Bill Veeck held a wonderful promotion for a guy named Joe Early. Joe Early was not a baseball player. If your listeners are thinking that maybe he played shortstop for Cleveland, no, he didn't. He was a guard at a Chevrolet plant who wrote a letter to the local newspaper complaining that there are lots of tributes to baseball players, but there are no tributes to the fans who pay their salary and basically who keep the economy going. So Bill Veeck held a tribute to Joe Early. And it was really a wonderful night. It was a lot of fun, and Early did get a lot of wonderful gifts. But it was quite a night.
So they're not all outrageous at the end of the day, but they could be in their own sort of positive kind of way. Here's my last question then for you, and this has been great. And again, the book chock full of these kinds of more stories and stuff, and it's head-scratchingly fun. And you'll ask yourself why, but and then you'll sit back and chuckle and go, well, why not? Well, in your mind, given your deep dive into all this stuff, what do you think it is about baseball in particular and its penchant for these kinds of promotional flights of fantasy, say relative to other sports instead?
Interesting. Well, we pointed out very early in our conversation that baseball franchises need to fill a whole lot more seats than hockey, basketball, or football, or for that matter, soccer. And you got to remember, even the best baseball team loses a third or more, loses probably 40% of their games. And the owners are looking to do something to bring fans into the ballpark. And I'd also argue that it just so happens that Bill Veeck, who inspired all this, was a baseball owner. I wondered when I was researching the book if Bill Veeck was a basketball team owner, would all this have happened in basketball?
So in that case, you're kind of giving Veeck kind of more the creativity thing than maybe the baseball thing. But I think you're right? I think the idea of just the fact that baseball has so much inventory, right, for the games.
That's right.
And a season can go south fairly quickly, right? And you could be playing the string as early as sometimes July of the All-Star break, depending on how things are going. Absolutely. And you got months of stuff to kind of bring people into the thing. And look, it continues today, right? I mean, bobblehead dolls and special theme nights and all that kind of stuff. And in minor leagues too, right? Don't hurt the proposition. And I will make you an argument that the level of craziness and innovation on the minor league front is probably even more outsized than what's transpired in the majors. But it's still baseball, quote unquote. Yes. And I think the entertainment factor in today's modern presentation of sports generally probably only makes that even more of an issue to get right, so to speak, for baseball.
Yes, absolutely. I would agree.
Okay, I learned a lot. Hope you did too. The Beatles playing to a half-empty Comiskey Park. Who knew? I also maintain that one of the more successful and or head-scratching promotions, I guess it wasn't a promotion, it was probably more of a thing going on during the game. Maybe call it a promotion, was the White Sox in 1976 when they had a few games wearing shorts and those stylized, revered and reviled, depending on your perspective, uniforms of the sort of modern lettered socks across the top, and people like Chet Lemon and Oscar Gamble, sliding in there and getting raspberries on their legs. That's just me. I'm sure you have your own favorites as well. Love to hear them. But in the meantime, I'd love to have you get a copy of this book so that you can regale in all of the craziness that folks like Charlie Finley and Bill Veeck and Bob Hope and Bill Giles brought to the game and still continue to influence. It is called Baseball's Most Outrageous Promotions from Wedlock and Headlock Day to Disco Demolition Night. It is published by our friends at McFarland Press. It is available now wherever you get good books. Of course, you can support the show that you're listening to now by going to our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com and purchasing this book and all the other books for goodness sakes through those links that we put out there for you on the episode description there, or in your podcast description too. The convenient links there too. And as you know, we got a few shekels of referral love when you purchase a book or an item through our friends at Amazon or any of our other partners for that matter. In that way. So we appreciate that very much, and hope you enjoyed the book as much as I did in talking about it. You'd like to send us some email, please do so. We're at hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. You can also find us on various socials. We're on Twitter X at goodseatsstill. You will find us at Blue Sky, on the Blue Sky thing, at goodseatsstillavailable.com. Follow us there. And just about everywhere else you can follow us on at all one word, Good Seats Still Available, including YouTube, where we stream all these episodes for you in case, for whatever reason, the podcast dynamic scares the heck out of you. It shouldn't, because that's the best way to find and follow us on your favorite podcast catcher. And tell your friends, please, and then have them tell their friends, and so on and so on. We appreciate all the love and support we get from you each and every week. More fun and frivolity coming at you for the holidays, God willing and my voice willing, and a whole lot of stuff coming up in the new year. So stay tuned for all of that. Thank you tremendously for listening. Thank you, Jerry Payne, for your audio excellence, of course. And we'll see you next week. Knock on wood.